Nice to see you again on this beautiful day. This time with a quote by Krishnamurti. There is only one fact: impermanence. And that resonates with so many philosophers whatsoever. But what is your take on the inevitability of impermanence in our lives, Peyton?
Yeah, this is one of the most um ever-present facts of reality, but yet one that's, in my opinion, very frequently veiled in our perception by the nature of language, especially. We're constantly talking to each other, communicating with each other, and thinking in terms of language and concepts, because that's what can be exported and transported and uploaded and downloaded and kind of used to transmit information between humans, and even to encode and remember and interpret and decipher information in ourselves. When I journal, I'm not really talking or communicating with anybody. I'm kind of using this as a means of thinking and in terms of understanding and interpreting my reality. But all of this is mediated by language. And language, and speaking especially of the English language, and this applies well to German as well, I believe, although I don't know directly, but it applies very well to Spanish and French, with which I'm familiar, and perhaps less in languages that come from far different families. But one thing that's hidden commonly in English is the ever-changing dynamic nature of reality, and also of the gray areas of boundaries. These concepts, nouns, verbs that we use commonly imply and point to a far more static nature of objects and movements and actions than is truly representative of reality. This is a liability of the way that we communicate. And so this commonly implies, and we even are accidentally, without thinking about it, implying a far more static nature to many, many things. I am this, he is that, this thing is this thing is here. All of the sentences that we say, or many, many of the sentences that we say, unless we are going to great pains and inefficiency in our communication in order to fully capture the impermanent nature of phenomena and objects, we will accidentally imply far more of a rigid structure to reality than actually exists. When in reality, when we look around and when we pay attention to our own experience, what we observe is that things are constantly changing. Nothing stays in place. And this concept of impermanence and a recognition of impermanence can fundamentally shift the way that we perceive our reality and perceive our own life. It can be incredibly freeing, and also it points us to many of the ways that we cause ourselves to suffer by trying to hold on to things, by trying to control things, and by ascribing more of an importance and a durability to events and conditions and objects than are actually representative of reality, creating much more gravity on whether or not I get my way with this, because in the way I'm talking about it, in the way that I'm conceptualizing it, it seems much more permanent than it actually is. And it's in that effect of it also feels much more enduring, unchanging, static than it actually is. So this is, I guess, a groundwork on the problem or the blindness that we tend to have to impermanence. What would you think about the way that we tend to conceive things in terms of their static nature versus the true impermanence, and how you understand the constantly changing nature of everything that emerges in our lives?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. And yeah, since everything is impermanent, we tend to underestimate what we can do in like a long time span. In 10 years time, so much things can happen, but in 1 year time, there's this saying that you tend to overestimate the things that are happening. So this kind of short-sightedness, this myopic view on things, like sometimes we live from moment to moment and from day to day. We have a routine and we think this routine will go on forever, but then suddenly things change again and we have to adapt ourselves again. And so now I think this kind of permanence, this perception of something permanent, tends to be more and more an illusion. It depends what we talk about. But yes, mountains seem permanent, but over the scale of a different time period, definitely they move altogether as well. And you see that when they crumble each new springtime after the winter um, exploded the stone fronts from within. And today I've been at the waterfall, and I also thought, okay, everything flows. Pantare, it's in Greek. Pantare, everything flows. You cannot step into the same river twice, because when you step into the river next time, the river changed and you changed. So there's this constant flux of things. And at the time when we feel very safe, tends to be also the time where we are confronted with the most significant change if we don't self-induce this significant change. So basically, it's a human condition, in my opinion. We have to learn to go with the flow. We have to adapt and adjust and take in how reality changed. And maybe there are also different subjective realities for different people. If I feel disrespected by something, another person does, but at the same time the other person feels disrespecting by me not doing anything, then there's two different subjective realities. And this is also the nature of reality, that it's not only changing, but it's different for different people. And so we have this weirdly complex flux of everything. And somehow we have to ground ourselves in some fundamental belief systems so that we stay sane, so that we can maintain good relationships and let go of the things that don't fit. But how do you, for example, gain this groundedness in things that are firm and solid and tend to be more permanent than impermanent?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, and I do think that there's so much downstream effects of our psychology as it relates to how we hold things and how we view things in terms of their permanence or impermanence. For example, when we view things as, we can look by, for instance, as how we treat a home that we live in when we are renting an apartment that we know we will live in for 1 year versus when we own a house. When I go into an apartment and I was living in an apartment, if something broke or if I noticed something that was off, or if I noticed that the roof may not last as long as I thought, or a gutter has an issue, or oh, the basement is quite ugly and unsightly or whatever, none of these really registered as a problem when it was a place I was renting. And then now when I own a house, if there is a piece of drywall that looks like it was poorly done or whatever, I may accidentally walk by it and feel aversion to how it looks over and over and over because it feels more permanent. It feels more a part of me. It feels something that I might, without intending to, wrap myself around and identify with. And this can be just as applicable to most things in our life. If we look at our emotions, if we look at our thoughts, if we look at our careers, if we look at our relationships, if we look at our body, if we look at our health, and all these things fundamentally are for rent. They are not for own, because one day we will die, and it will be, notwithstanding some technological innovations that haven't come yet, it probably will happen this century, that we will no longer be here. And so we do not have even a 99-year lease on anything. And for most things, far, far less than that. None of this is truly, truly owned, including our own mind, including our own body, including our own self. And a recognition of this can have the power to give us a gentler grip on the events and changes and items in our life, less of an attachment, because we know that we cannot hold on to this thing forever, and less of a desire, because we know that even if I get this thing, I will only have it for a time, and my emotions around it will change. I will not be kind of locked into a state of hedonic euphoria during the entire, 2 years that I own this motorcycle, or 1 year that I live in this place, or whatever, even this time that I'm in this romantic relationship, even if it is for the rest of my life. All of these things will change. Eventually they will all go. And a view of impermanence, in my view, can give us a more balanced relationship with events and objects. However, the things that are more static in our life, of course, it's important to recognize even the impermanence within these processes. And so, if I am hoping to live in a new place, for example, and I see that this will improve how I feel day to day or whatever, then it is also useful for me to recognize that actually some days I feel good, some days I feel bad, some days my health will be good, some days my health will be bad, some days my energy will be good, some days my energy will be bad. Some days I will live in a wonderful place, but there will be turmoil in my relationships and I will feel contraction. Some days I will live in a place that I do not like, where the weather is terrible, but yet I will feel great optimism and the quality of my thoughts will be very good, and so that it is good. And even across these things where perhaps I am in this place for a certain amount of time, within that time it will go this, it will go that, it will go this, it will go that. And so the fantasies and the stories and the narratives that we tell ourselves about where we are, where we're going, where we have been, the things that we have, the things that we want, the people that we are around, the people and relationships that we would like to have, it's fairly useful to have a more balanced perspective that incorporates the reality of our lived experience with these things, which is not only on the big picture are these things impermanent in the sense that one day we'll have them, one day we will not, but even within these things, they are constantly our experience of things that even are static when you look at them objectively. Our experience of them is totally subjective and it's totally ever shifting. Our relationship with these things and the energy they bring us is ever shifting. And so this can help us see an opportunity within the places that we are at, as well as a gentler hold on things that we want, in the sense of we can recognize that, okay, just because this thing is in my life that on the whole may be positive or negative, let's use as an example, it does not mean that some days it is more or less or it isn't more or less negative than others. It doesn't mean there's nothing to do while it is here, or we must surrender, or we must have a victim mentality about things that are going on, because there is nested impermanence even within the things that have a certain time span. The ebbs and flows and energy within the bounds of that thing is constantly shifting, and this changing and dynamic nature of our experience is something that can give us, in my view, a greater ability to recognize our own agency within the confines of where we're at. That is something that within language and narrative we can frequently blind ourselves to, myself included. How do you think about the reframing that we can bring to various aspects of our life with a recognition of impermanence?
Well, that's an awesome question, because reframing is really powerful if you apply it to your own brain, or even invite others to think in a different frame about a thing that they perceive. And I like that you said in everything there's this kind of nested impermanence. Nothing stays forever, and like you can also see it and reframe it from a bigger perspective. You can zoom out, zoom on your whole lifespan, maybe from birth to your death. May it be 100 years or more, but also you won't get more than 200 years or whatever. I don't know yet, but I don't want to. I don't want to forfeit, but uh, we tend to all die at one point. Even the richest people die. Charlie Munger died with 100, and he's got quite some wisdom on that. Talking about always invert. If you think something is permanent, see the impermanence in it, maybe like that. But reframing our brain is really powerful, because we can take agency, like you said, and shift our narrative from a place of guilt or shame or victimhood mentality. We can easily, through telling ourselves a different story, shift to a place of agency, of acceptance, of seeing the bigger picture, of stepping back to look at your picture and see where you want to place the next painting next. So if we zoom out to our lifespan, nothing will last. We will die. in our houses there will be people that we don't even know. Our stuff that we dearly collected will either be in the trash or another guy has it or another girl, whatever. Then we see our insignificance, and that gives us the freedom to do what we like to do, because since it does not really matter what we do, so then we could also do the things we liked. So just like that, take the agency back and reframe it in a way that helps us to have a better life, to live better relationships, and see the world in a more positive light. Because the world is as it is, regardless of what we believe of it. So we could as good as well put just on rosy glasses or yellow glasses, whatever, to see the world in a different light if it pleases us and it does not harm anybody. So why not just choose the things that we like? Just choose to see the things that we love to see. Just go to places we love. We don't have to be constantly confronted with negative news, with places we don't like, or with people that are not a fit for us. We don't have to do that. We could just take agency and say to ourselves, we are not a victim here. Even if we are misunderstood, we have agency. We can move on. We can go to the next place. And it tends to be the case that the more we resist accepting that a certain thing is happening or accepting a thing, the more it hurts. But the less we resist, the more we step into the flow, the more we accept that things are impermanent, and there's a nested impermanence in certain kinds of things, like short-term relationships, or like a house even, or a place where we live, or a work we have, or a place where we want to be or are. Yeah, there's a nested impermanence we just can accept, and from that move on to the next part. Yeah, what do you think about the reframing, Peyton?
Yeah, this acceptance of impermanence is such an important step. And if you look closely, we are constantly not doing this. Like a great first step if we want to navigate the world and enjoy the best journey that we can is first, let's make peace with the nature of reality. If we are trying to make things permanent and we have this story in our mind about how I should be able to hold things right where they are, I should be able to keep things as they are, that reality should stay static. If we have this implied in our energy and our actions, we are fundamentally in conflict with the nature of reality. We are disagreeing with how things are. And we never, ever, ever win that disagreement. Like in reality, we can look back to all the times that we have tried to make something permanent, to hold on to something, to keep things locked in place. It's never worked. And the more attached we are to keeping things in place, the more we give ourselves rope burn, how I like to put it. Like think about if there's a rope that is pulled by like a large ship with masts on it. This ship that weighs 1,000 times more than us, and we have a rope that we've kind of untied it from the dock, and now we have the rope in our hands. And then a gust of wind takes the sails, and the ship goes away. If we try to hold on to this rope, we are not going to hold that ship in place. That is like us trying to hold reality where it's at. If the ship goes away, the tighter I hold on this rope, it does not mean the ship will stay in place more. It means that my hands will get rope burn. This is our experience of attachment. This is our experience of wanting reality to stay how it is by disagreeing with the nature of impermanence. And this happens on the outside, of course, if we want to keep things as they are, if we want to hold on to every relationship, every possession, every positive feeling that we have in every relationship or whatever, and feelings of good energy, our health, all of these things, we are holding on to this rope that is attached to this ship that is so large that we could never hold on to it, and we will give ourselves rope burn. This also applies, though, within. This is why identity is so potentially a double-edged sword. This is why identity is oftentimes the ground in which most of our suffering is rooted. Because if I see something happen, let's say that I'm in a leadership position and I have a really crucial conversation with somebody that is pushing me to the edge of my ability. I'm in interpersonal flow. I am staying in the moment and I'm observing the intuitive capacity for responsiveness and conversation to emerge. And with courage and truth, I do things extremely well, and it leaves me with a sense of greater connection as well as good agency and effectiveness. And all of a sudden, I tell myself a little bit of a story, piece by piece, about, oh, wow, you're pretty good at talking to people. You're a pretty good leader. Maybe you're charismatic. Maybe you're persuasive or really courageous, or you're so good at sticking to your virtues and you're an amazing entrepreneur. The more and more I have these words, which once again, words are rigid, words are static, words are black and white, descriptions, adjectives, identifiers, these things are within them, there are disagreements with impermanence, unless we are kind of going to lengths to say that sometimes we are this, sometimes we are that, which is not typically how that voice narrates. The more we identify with these things, we are accidentally building rigidity into our very way of being, into our very identity. These attachments come in our ways of being, in the ways that we see ourselves act, to where all of a sudden, if I go in the next day, I am sleep deprived and I have another important conversation with somebody, and then instead of how I was yesterday, now I am over-rehearsed, I am rigid, I am having this desire to avoid the hard aspects of the conversation, and maybe I say something that was that betrayed a lack of awareness, or betrayed ways of being that I do not wish to be, and I was less effective than I like, I was not charismatic or well communicative, whatever. That will happen. Like, we will do things well sometimes and poorly some other times, but if I've woven this great tapestry of identity around myself, these labels, these identifiers, and if I've started to hold on to them, if I've said to myself, not that, oh yes, I am capable of this to the extent that the flow enables me to handle a conversation well, most of the time, depending on causes and conditions, to a limited extent, that is within the range of normal human performance, that is something that I am content with and can be good enough given the circumstances that I have in front of me. That doesn't tend to be how the ego weaves the story. If instead it tells a story of, oh, I am this, I'm good at this, I'm amazing at this, I'm so special, I am so charismatic, I'm so smart, I will be so great, I will have all these things that I want, and then and it will be because I am just so special and great and wonderful that I get all these things. If that story has gone out there and we've become attached to it, this is this internal rope burn. And in my experience, the internal rope burn of seeing the disillusionment of our own characteristics or abilities or performance or whatever, having to have this one reality that we wish we could superimpose over the much less flattering reality in front of us, that leads to a lot of pain. That leads to a lot of suffering. That leads to a worse way of being and reduced capabilities to be in the flow and to be our best self. And so it can happen with events outside, it can happen with events within, and ultimately, in order to be wiser and better at navigating both and experience far less self-inflicted suffering, a reasonable orientation or intention for ourselves can be, given that reality is always shifting and that I cannot hold any of this in place. I cannot hold the experiences, I cannot hold the feelings, I cannot hold the thoughts, I cannot hold the relationships, I cannot hold the objects, I cannot hold the successes, I cannot hold the positive momentum, I cannot even hold my own life in place. Eventually I will die. Eventually I will lose every single thing that I have ever had. And if we can recognize this and truly accept that, like, okay, resistance is futile. This is the very nature of reality. I can navigate reality far better if I am in harmony and peace with reality rather than trying to force something to superimpose over it and disagree with it. And so this intention that we can bring to more and more aspects of our life, and I think for many of us, some are harder to bring this to than others, but an intention of flexibility. Because if the waves are coming, then trying to hold them in place is just going to get us thrashed around. We want to instead become better surfers, better at shaping events as they come, better at responding to forces and dancing with forces that are completely and inevitably overpowering. And that flexibility, rather than a rigidity, in my view, is at the root of our posture toward this reality that we find ourselves in, this ever-shifting dynamic flow of impermanence happening without and within in all moments and in large phases throughout our life. What do you think about incorporating or integrating this posture of flexibility? What tend to be the practices or the keys? And yeah, I'm curious to hear about the making peace with reality and what to do about this whole fact of impermanence in all the ways that it shows up.
Well, awesome that you mentioned that identity can be a double-edged sword. Like, even it can be really rigid, but you can also make it alive from within, shape it through your interactions with reality as it is. And therefore, using words to describe yourself is rigid, you said. And this is also something that reminds me of the ancient old wisdom from Lao Tzu. In his chapter, "The Soft and the Flexible," maybe he wrote about that. I took it out right now as you talked. Maybe I can read it shortly.
Please, yes.
Yeah, the soft and flexible. When first born, we are small and weak. The living are soft and flexible. When we die, we become hard and stiff. The dead are rigid, unmoving. The greenery, grasses, plants, and trees, growing are tender and supple. Dead are dry and brittle. And so the strong and hard go along with dying. The open to change and flexible with living. When an army becomes inflexible, it suffers defeat. A tree that won't bend easily breaks in storms. The hard and strong will fail, the open-hearted prevail. I love that because it reminded me of the tree that won't bend, easily breaks in a storm. It's okay to be rigid when there is no storm. So you have a rigid structure that keeps you firm in place, and you can identify so that you stay sane and so on. But as soon as a storm comes, like life changes dramatically, a loved one dies, or you lose your job, or you have to completely reinvent yourself because of a meteorite that comes upon Earth. I don't know. Anything that can happen that resembles a storm in life will break if you're overly identified rigid with high rigidity. But if you have this aliveness, this ability to figure things out, maybe this belief about yourself that you have agency, that you can move around things. If something breaks, you can move around and fix it somehow. You can gather people and help and fix it. If you have a belief which is flexible about yourself, and this flexibility within yourself to really change your behavior so that things change that you don't like, or things change to the better so that you like it more, then you're not the tree that won't bend and breaks in the storm, but you are the tree that bends in the storm, but still has a certain kind of rootedness in core beliefs, in core identity, but not overly rigidly explaining, okay, I'm this and that and that and that and that not. Because as soon as something rigid confronts reality, the hard realities, like glass that falls to the floor, it shatters, it breaks. But I love the last sentence, the hard and strong will fail, the open-hearted prevail. So the key practice here is, as mentioned 2,500 or more years ago, to keep an open heart. And what does it mean to keep an open heart? To just not close it, or to just not build structures which close you down from experiencing life. If you are hurt, then stay in the pain. Don't close down. Just allow it to flow through, and don't resist against it. Don't have this overly high self-importance, where you think, okay, now my complete life is wrecked, and I'm as good as dead or whatever. And then you lose life. Some people are suicidal, and they lost their life before they took their lives because they were overly rigid in identifying themselves and trying to attach to a certain kind of outcome. Maybe, well, I don't know. That may be one piece of a path that one goes. But yeah, if you lose your liveliness and you lose the connection to the things that make you come alive, then you tend to become rigid. As Lao Tzu said, the dead are rigid, unmoving. As soon as you don't move anymore, you're dead. As soon as you have no problems anymore, you're dead. So, not the other way around. uh, yeah, we tend to have a overly high importance, emphasizing on ourselves, but in the end, it's not so much important. Things will change, and storms will come and will shake things up. Maybe you will lose some of your branches that you grow as a tree because you've been too rigid in some places. But then it's evolution for yourself, isn't it? Like you lose a branch and you say to yourself, oh, maybe I've been too rigid with that. Maybe I've been clinging too much on that. And you see that the branches which have been soft, they are still alive and even growing stronger because they have been faced a challenge which they can now grow their roots stronger into the ground. And so this is also impermanence. Doesn't mean it only has to decay. Impermanence also can mean something can grow, something can get stronger. And this impermanence means also being alive. So the practice one is don't close your heart, so the open-hearted prevail. And the second one is, don't close your heart.
This is wonderful. I love the tree is such a wonderful example of this, and one that I've thought of many times, but I've only thought of it in the past in terms of the whole tree, of like, oh yes, the rigid will get snapped and fall over during a storm, but it is very resonant with my own experience that different ones of my branches can become far more rigid, and those particular branches can be where we experience the pain when there is a snapping off of one of our branches in a storm. That can hurt. It can really hurt, and that pain can signal to us that we've become rigid there. We've gained this attachment to feeling this way about ourselves or viewing ourselves in a certain light, for example, and we just can't bear this evidence to the contrary, and it just breaks this part of us. Or in many other aspects of our life. It is interesting to think on this scale that we are a tree and that our different branches can have different elements of rigidity. The other thing that this points to that I think is so true in my own experience is that it is not in the good times that the rigidity harms you. It is not when everything is going well that you feel the true consequences of amassing attachments to and amassing identities and amassing desires and attachments to the visions that we have for the future. In the good times, these things are temptations. They all feel good. They can feel addictive. They can hijack our dopamine system and really lead us to reinforcing thought patterns that cause us to make ourselves more and more rigid in our relationship to reality as we see it in the present or the future. And yet it is in the storms that we really wish that we would have cultivated more flexibility, more balance, more of a supple relationship with the parts of ourselves and the parts of our world that tend to have the highest emotional resonance with us. And so This is, and frequently it is this cycle that we have, and in the good times we succumb to the temptations that cause our bad times to be so much more painful, and in the bad times we by force must yield to the flexibility that is then the foundation for better internal balance, health, and relationship with reality. We're almost forced to our knees in order that we must surrender to the fact that this storm is far more powerful than I could ever hope to resist by tensing up, flexing up, and making myself more and more rigid. The only way to survive this storm is to learn to be flexible and to move with it, rather than attempt to outstrong it, because it is just far, far beyond my power to resist something this intense, and I will snap in half if I try to. And I've felt that the hard way many, many times. So this is a useful intention for us to bring into the good times of our life. Is what am I doing to cultivate flexibility that will lead to a capacity for anti-fragility, to robustness, to the immense volatility of our journeys that is guaranteed to await before us on our path. And so that's some intentions I have this week. Also, just a renewed look at identity and the way that this truly does weaken us when we are identified, when we are wrapping ourselves around certain concepts and narratives, when we are holding on to a certain way of viewing ourselves or viewing our relationship with others, or a certain story that we have in our mind, or a self-image, or an imagined image that others may have of us. Ultimately, these are forms of attachment and rigidity that are guaranteed to weaken us amid the fact of impermanence of our life, impermanence of our own actions and ways of being. And so, so very useful, practical intentions to bring into this week, to remember that impermanence implies that some strategies are losing strategies, and that flexibility and yielding to the nature of the universe is generally a far better way to approach the dynamic and uncontrollable nature of our lives. Any other closing thoughts from you, my friend?
Yeah, man. Thanks. Great question at the end. What can we do to enhance our flexibility in certain kinds of storms, and our capacity to experience anti-fragility in terms of growing from the challenge and growing to be better and bigger and stronger after that? And yeah, I also wanted to say, okay, the practice was not closing your heart, and second was looking for what makes you come alive more.
Yes.
Yes. And so also, what can make us come alive more? Maybe I ask these questions in the upcoming week much more. What makes me come alive? Just look for it, and let's become flexible. Let's try to identify our weak, rigid spots. Try to make them more alive again, maybe.
Wonderful intention.
Appreciate you, Peyton, and see you next time, man.
Likewise, my friend. Really enjoyed the conversation. Looking forward to the next one. Have a great week.
Have a great one.